we've got a townhouse, and it cost a lot to put the scaffolding up to do it, so it was a bit more. But the balcony panels, yeah, we're going to have a pair. We're going to get some of those when they're available in the shops from the end of next month, because I think the average setup contributes about 800 watts. It won't run a full house, but it'll certainly take the edge off. You know.
So how long before you make the money back on the £10,000 investment?
Well, I don't know. If we get the sun we're getting right now, it'll be a lot quicker than I thought it was. I thought the investment would pay back, and that's how I see it, as an investment, not a cost. An investment would have paid back in about 9.5 years. At the minute, I'm looking at about 6.5, given how much has come off my bill every month this summer.
And obviously, you can get a finance plan on it, can you?
I'm not sure.
You're speaking to somebody who was for a while a cavity wall insulation salesman, so I'm going into mode a bit there.
Well,
gosh, it's taken. Go on.
That's the thing, is if you had a plan that you could buy it and offset it, it would become, instead of seeing it as a cost, you put money into your car, and the last car that I sold depreciated by £1,000 a year. But I was quite happy to pay that to have the utility of having the car.
That's what I was thinking.
The solar panels,
price of a car, 10k. I was thinking that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. So in the 10 years that I had the car, it lost almost all of its value. But the point is that with solar panels, you're getting, interesting enough, if there are any issues, I don't know if you've seen the emergency climate briefing. They talk about restrictions and on power and so on. If you have solar panels with a battery, then you actually have a little bit of insurance against power interruptions as well.
Laurie, come back in here.
In
a manner of speaking, right. I'm enjoying myself this morning, even though it's grim, because this is just all so interesting. Laurie, yeah, follow Tony.
Well, yeah, he's given us a great list of the kind of practical things that matter for the country at large, but then also for us as individuals. And as you've heard there, they help us day to day in a world that's become pretty expensive and pretty dangerous. One thing to hammer home here is that we hear a lot, rightly, about the threat to the country from Russia and other potential sources of conflict, right? But what we don't hear enough about is how in recent years, some of the stuff that nature's thrown our way, you could argue have been the biggest security challenges this country's ever faced. The pandemic, I would definitely say, lobbed at us by nature, was the biggest security threat that the country experienced since the Second World War, if you look at the scale of death and disruption that caused. And then in recent years...
Increasingly, they think it came from a lab, but via nature. Yeah.
But exactly, someone didn't invade us, right? It wasn't Russia coming and knocking on the door, and you need a different type of defense to that, right? One that's much more about the stability of our society, about looking after each other, and it's the same with what climate change is throwing our way. You know, our food security as a country is being fundamentally threatened by weather that's going haywire, caused by fossil fuel pollution. And yet at this critical moment where, again, rightly, we're hearing about the need to invest more in defense, we're not hearing enough about what we need to invest in the stability of our society, because in the end of the day, we could be prepared to fight a war with Russia, but we might not be able to actually follow through on that, because our home society has been so destabilized by extreme weather events, by rampant inflation caused by disruption to supply chains and so on and so forth. So I think it's time to take pause at this really important political moment for the security of our country and understand that we can't fight the climate with guns, and we will need far more investments to make us all much safer in this clearly very unstable climatic world.
One more, Emma.
Nikki, could I just add one thing about that whole thing about security very quickly? I'm part of a group down here in Portsmouth that are actually supporting the emergency climate briefing. Okay, now that is 50 minutes where experts across the field, not a politician in sight, literally talk about what we've just said. General Nugent actually talks about the threat as to the UK. There are whole areas where people, if they go along to one of these screenings, they get a chance to be informed and make their own mind up. But it covers experts talking about the cost of doing this, is a lot less than it was. It's 73% less than it was just 5 years ago of this transition to net zero, and the benefits for our security are listed. I recommend anybody who has a chance to go to one of these briefings, just go and make your own mind up.
I might go to the Odyssey instead, you know what I mean? I'm just thinking, you know, do I want that in my life?
The thing is, I've seen the Odyssey as well, and yes, that was a bit tough. But this one is not just you sitting there; it's in a group where you end up having a discussion afterwards, where it's about other people's reactions and how you feel, and then what you would like to do about it.
Like a self-help group,
and how to get
involved.
I
get that. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, talk it out.
Talk it out, talk it through, which is what we're doing. Emma, one more from you. Of course, we wouldn't have any worries about the Strait of Hormuz if we got our act together, would we?
No, and I think the points about solar power, for example, becoming a lot cheaper are absolutely true, but it's still quite expensive if you're on a lower income, and I think that's where we need government to take action more quickly to stabilise things like the payback you get when you feed into the grid, to make solar panels cheaper so that you don't have to buy them necessarily as a one-off, you can spread your payments. This is about ensuring climate equity, in essence, and climate justice, and making sure that everybody has access to cheaper electricity, to more stable and more reliable electricity, and that they live in homes that are conducive to coping with hotter, drier temperatures. And that's where government's not taking action. In fact, the government's as part of the Climate Change Act, set up the Committee on Climate Change as an independent body to critique them and their action on climate change. And they've recently said that action, in fact, they've said for many years now that action on climate change, both in terms of mitigation, but particularly in terms of climate change adaptation and climate change risk, is inadequate. It's disjointed.
Okay.
And those things have got to improve.
Joined up thinking, thank you. We started talking about wildfires, but then we moved on to not unrelated issues. It is, sorry I'm late. Thank you very much, everybody. It's 10:36.
The voice of the UK.
This is BBC Radio 5.
Trying our best to work hard and we're trying our best to be ambitious.
That's our point of difference.
For some people listening, it matters. Nikki Campbell.
On BBC Radio 5 Live.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Fiona in the Cairngorms, Tanya in Crowborough, Dr. Abigail. I thought I said Abigail Warning. I went, oh, how apt. And Fraser Lyle coming up as well, Senior Policy Advisor at the Association of British Insurers, talking forest fires, talking solar panels, talking climate. Keep talking happy talk. Fiona in the Cairngorms. Whoa, reindeer business there. What's it been like, Fiona?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. So Wednesday the 15th, we were alerted to a wildfire locally that may impact us. And then sort of it got to the afternoon of Wednesday and it became apparent that they were thinking about evacuating Glenmore, which is where we live. So we had to come up with some sort of plan. And so lots of quick thinking and moving. And that night we did get evacuated from our home.
How did you get the reindeer sorted?
So there was we have a small group in our paddock area, which we initially thought we need to get them on the hill to join the herd in mountain enclosure, but then it became apparent maybe 2 hours later that actually the hill enclosure itself may be impacted. So we had to let the 35 reindeer that we had in the enclosure, we had to release them out onto the open mountain.
Mm-hmm. How will you get them back?
They were all very tame. They were a little bit headless chickens. The dynamics of that particular herd were quite young males. It's not what they'd usually do at this time of year. It's not an area that they usually free range. But they're animals with instincts. So it was that, or we weren't allowed access to the enclosure at all. So we kind of had no choice. And they've cracked on. We've caught up with most of them since 29 and 35, and we're not worried about the others. There's other reindeer that are free range at this time of year, so they'll likely catch up with them.
So it's happened before?
Pardon?
The wildfire in the Cairngorms, has it happened before? I'm just scratching.
No, not to my knowledge. No.
No. How would it start?
I don't know the ins and outs of exactly where it started, but from what I gather, it's an area that doesn't really attract any wild camping. It's very deep heather. It's next to a forestry track.
Could be a bit of glass or something like that. Someone's
potentially glass. I mean, what glass would be doing out there? I don't know. It's not somewhere you have glass. A cigarette. Not sure, and I'm not sure they'll ever know.
No. Well, I hope everything works out, Fiona. Thank you very much indeed.
No problem. Cheers.
When will you be back in business, back to normal for the?
I'm not sure. So we were evacuated on the 15th. We got back into our home on the 20th, and staff were able to come back up to the centre and function the office. But we've not been open to public since, and that's coming up for 2 weeks. And we've not been given any idea yet of when we can reopen. So obviously July, middle of summer holidays, peak time for us to be getting an income to support us for the rest of the year, and that's not quite happening.
No,
so,
but
tricky times.
It's tricky times. Beautiful part of the world. Thank you very much, Fiona.
No problem.
All the best to you. I know it so well as well. Tanya, I'll be with you in a second. Dr. Abigail Waring, Fraser Lyle as well. Abigail, climate scientist at the University of Leicester, specialising in land and ice surface temperature and extreme climate. Did you know it would be like this, Abigail, as bad as this?
Well, models have been projecting this for a long time. Especially climate models, and I particularly use Earth observations. So a great team, surface temperature research group, NCO in Leicester, produce high resolution surface temperature data. So we've been looking and tracking these surface temperature trends for a long time, and droughts and heat waves are natural hazards that are associated and linked to climate change.
Mm-hmm. It seems to have become a kind of part of the culture wars, ideology and politics. There's a very interesting article in The Telegraph that I was referring to earlier on about this by Tim Stanley, basically saying, look, those on the right who cleave to this position, we need to kind of get real on it. What do we all need to realise, as people of this nation? What do we need to get our heads around, Abigail?
So it's actually a really good question. So basically, there's a dissemination between weather and climate. So heat waves and droughts are natural weather events, and you would expect them in summer. But to this extent, to this intensity, and to this frequency, we should not be seeing. And a lot of people like to relate it back to like the 1976 heat wave. Yes, that was an intense heat wave, and that's a normal thing to happen in summer. But we've seen how relentless the record-breaking temperatures have been just this year alone. We're breaking global temperatures almost on an annual basis. And this is directly related to human-induced global climate change. And it's not that these droughts and heat waves didn't happen before. It's that they're getting worse and more frequent, and we're struggling to deal and adapt to that. And we need to really put things in place and realize and utilize things like Earth observation data to inform policy and to put in place changes that are accessible for everybody to achieve.
And Dr. Waring, if you were to become Prime Minister, what would your priority in this area be? What would you be saying to your cabinet? We need to put funds into this. What would this be?
Well, actually, one of the key things that we're working on, I'm publishing a policy brief this summer, next month, I think, with the Institute for Policy. And this is to call for a national heatwave dashboard. And we regularly know about air temperatures, but not very many people use or are aware of land surface temperature. Now we need to integrate this to understand what's actually happening to the vegetation, to cities, to rural areas, particularly for the UK. And that will help us to increase in response and awareness and changes to the heat, especially
knowledge is power.
Further heat waves.
Knowledge is power.
Yes, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And a sensible Prime Minister would be, I'm not saying this one is or isn't because I have impartiality, but a sensible Prime Minister would be saying, any Prime Minister at any time in our era would be saying, let's sort our water companies out so that we maximise the amount of water that we get, because water in the future is going to be quite a commodity, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think especially with the droughts that we're suffering with the heat waves, but also it's not just water, it's energy, but it's also efficiency of being able to allow the average working person uptake, say, renewable energy and make it affordable to actually be cleaner. And also the UK's position in global climate change as well. We can do all that we want, but we need to actually make sure the whole world is doing this. And, you know, that might be an unrealistic expectation, but at least the UK can be ahead of prioritising and making the water, energy and living situations efficient.
Mm-hmm. Tanya, good morning. Interesting, Abigail. Hi, Tanya Crowborough. Tell me what you do, where you are and what you want to say.
Okay. I work as a burns consultant in East Grinstead.
Wow.
I have relatively just come back. I just got back in the early hours this morning from France, from the southwest. We were staying in a place called Biscarrosse, which is where the family have been on holiday for the last 60 years. My parents found it in the 60s. So we were staying there, and about 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, a vehicle caught fire on the road between Biscarrosse and Sanguinet, the two locations that are very close to us as a family. And that's 5 miles away from where we were at our villa. We didn't think much of it. We saw the smoke. We heard the sirens. We assumed it would all be controlled like you do. But over the next few hours, the fire obviously spread until eventually it was wrapped completely around us. And we could see the flames. We could see the emergency aircraft collecting water from our lake and dropping it. And eventually, later on in the night, we had actual live sparks of still on fire arriving in the garden. So your guy at the beginning was talking about the smoke and the pine needles. Those were falling at about 5 o'clock. But by about 9:30 in the evening, we were actually having things that were actively still burning. At which point we decided that we needed to leave, even though everyone was saying there wasn't any need to. But actually, suddenly it went from being it's a way away to being close to us. And in fact, the gymnasium my son went to, which was only half a kilometre from our house, actually burnt down completely during this blaze. So we went from it's a vehicle on fire on a fire 5 miles away to being, really scary, wrapped around the whole house, darkness, smoke, and we needed to evacuate. We were able to go back the following morning just briefly and cleared the rest of our belongings into our minibus, and then headed north because we were able to, and reduced the length of stay in our favourite place. Delighted to say that our villa is okay. The fire has continued to wrap round Biscarrosse and gone out to the east. And we're terribly sad, obviously, for the other people that are there, but we're very pleased that our own villa is okay. Although this area that we've all known as a family for decades is obviously not going to be the same again, sadly.
Ever.
But it was amazing to see the responses of the emergency services and just the sheer volume of fire vehicles and the aircraft. They were coming really low over the house and throwing out, a huge amount of water and scooping. And we saw this happening. And the crews are clearly working. And it's amazing when you consider just the sheer amount of fire that there haven't been any human casualties, although obviously there will have been wildlife casualties. But it was extremely scary. And that sort of, you go from being not a problem to, oh, hang on a minute, this is a problem, to get in the bus, guys, we're now leaving. That speed of fire progression is something that is, it's really scary. It goes from being amusing and interesting and something you want to have a quick look at and, oh, let's go and have a look at the fire, to being, hang on a minute, this is no longer a joke. We need to get out of here now.
What was the smell?
The smell was principally the smoke, and during the night you could smell it. And we evacuated into the centre of Biscarrosse Field to another house because we bumped into the people who we used to let from in a different villa. But by 4 o'clock in the morning, the smoke was so dense that even though we had the windows closed and an air conditioning unit on, we all woke at about 4 in different rooms with the smell of smoke penetrating.
Was it burning wood, though?
Burning
that
wood,
smell?
yeah, very much burning wood. And then when we went back to the villa in the morning just to pack, it was so dense that we found some old COVID masks in our vehicle and put them on. Everyone was like, I don't care who wore this when we had COVID. It was stuffed in the rubbish corner. We're going to put it on now because you were just coughing because of the density of the smoke. And then everything in the bus was full of smoke. And when we got back into the bus again, when we stopped a bit after we'd managed to evacuate, it was full of smoke. And then we shook out all our towels and the clothes and things when we got to the campsite further north, and everything was smoky, and we relaxed and thought, okay, well, it's just come out of our bus, it's all fine. But by Saturday afternoon, the smoke from the Bordeaux fire had actually come into the environment of Poitiers, even though we were 3 hours drive north, and we thought, oh gosh, the smoke is spreading. And even this morning, things that we unloaded from our minibus now, which had been airing for the whole time we were in Poitiers, still smell of smoke. Everything in the van is completely smoky. Every suitcase you open, every bag you open, you get another waft of the smoke that really penetrated everything, and the dust, everything. It's like Pompeii. Everything is covered in that dust. It was really scary.
Thank you very much for that. Mark in Bergerac, what's your experience, Mark?
Hi, morning. Yeah, very similar to your previous caller, actually, although it was our first time in southwest France and staying on a campsite just outside Biscarrosse. So, yeah, like your previous caller, we were sort of first made aware of the fire as we were just coming back from the pool at our campsite and just returning to have some food. And I sort of noticed ash on my forearms and then looked up and could see sort of billowing smoke not too far away. So yeah, I think we were within sort of 5 kilometres of that vehicle fire that had broken out. And like your previous caller, I think just feeling the sort of enormity and the speed of how quickly the fire spread. We've got 3 children, and so I think our sort of obviously our priority was to stay calm and to listen to the information that we were given at the campsite, and also look online for other info. But like the previous caller said, I think we were sort of told initially, no, stay put, you'll be okay. We then tried to resume sort of our holiday and had a fairly normal-ish evening, but was disrupted by a lot of our aircraft coming across, a sort of helicopter with giant sort of buckets of water in it as well, and just the sort of increasing smell and the smoke that was looking really close to the campsite. We then, at around sort of 9:30, we went and tried to enjoy a Queen tribute act that was playing at the campsite. And just as the band had finished their rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody, someone from the campsite came onto stage and told us that we had to evacuate the campsite. So we weren't sort of in a rush in terms of we did have opportunity to pack our things. Yeah. And then we made our way. I wonder perhaps whether the same gymnasium that the previous caller's son had spent the night in. So we were there with obviously hundreds of others that had been evacuated as well. So spent the night on rather hard gymnasium floor, but again the info that was given to us was good and clear. We were given some water and some food as well. And then in the morning, we were able to return to the campsite just to pick up our things, which we did, although I managed to forget most of my underwear. But then we, as a family, decided at that point that it was hugely unlikely that we would be able to get back and resume the rest of our holiday at that campsite. So that's why we decided to move east. So we've come to the Dordogne region now, just outside Bergerac. We've got a few days left of our holiday. So
enjoy, if you can. Yeah, Mark, I want to get a couple of more voices on, but some stories there from Mark, and many people are getting in touch with us, and Tanya as well. That was extraordinary. What of holidays? What of people who are there at the moment on holiday, or who are planning to go? Fraser Lyle, Senior Policy Advisor at the Association of British Insurers. Just wanted to get you on. Help us out here, Fraser. What's the situation for people?
Good morning. So I think first and foremost, our thoughts are with anyone who's affected by these wildfires. We recognise this is an incredibly worrying and stressful time for those in the region, but those who are also planning on travel. I think probably the most important thing to say at this time is that if you are in the south of France at the moment, that following the advice of the local authorities and the emergency services is paramount, and make sure that if you are planning on travel, check the Foreign Office guidance as soon as you can. But for those in the region, your safety comes first. So you should make sure that you are safe before doing anything else. Insurers are there to support their customers, and anyone who's unsure about what their policy might cover should speak directly to their insurer once it's safe to do so.
If I'm there and my holiday is interrupted by this, will I get my money back if I'm in a villa or something like that, a hotel?
So many policies do include cover for trip disruption or natural disasters, which may help if your holiday has been cut short by wildfires. However, policies do differ, so it's important not to make assumptions. The best course of action is to contact your insurer, who can explain exactly what you're covered for and what cover might be available under your policy.
Thank you very much indeed. So, Tony in Greece, what do we need to do? What needs to change, Tony?
Well, good morning, Nicky. I think a wildfire will not start without a catalyst. A vehicle catching fire is unfortunate, maybe not avoidable, but the majority of wildfires don't start on their own. Here in Greece, during TV breaks, advert breaks, we often get advice as to what not to do during the fire season. For example, don't have a barbecue out in the countryside. Don't use an electric power tool, which might create a spark. And also, one of the most common causes of starting a wildfire is a simple thing like a discarded plastic bottle, a water bottle. The sun shines through it like a magnifying glass, and it doesn't take long before there's enough heat there to start a grass fire. And I think education is needed. People in the UK need to change attitudes as to how they operate during the long dry seasons, which will probably become more and more common. I think education. Fires don't start on their own.
No. And of course, sometimes there is nefarious activity too. Thank you, Tony. That was important.
You're welcome, Nicky.
Take care in Greece. Thanks all very much indeed. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time for another 2 hours of riveting conversation. Take care.
Mika essaye de grouiller parce qu'il arrive à un cours. Vas-y.
Hello, welcome. I'm Martine Croxall. Fire crews are racing to take advantage of more favourable conditions to contain massive blazes in France and Spain before another heatwave sets in from Tuesday. In France, President Macron has been holding a crisis cabinet meeting as fires bear down on the southwestern city of Bordeaux, where the blaze is so large it's generating its own weather system and lightning. The local mayor described it as a fire unlike any he's seen before, and warned it's a race against time ahead of 37-degree temperatures. But rain overnight has helped stabilise conditions for now. In Spain, the government says the country faces a decisive 2 days to contain wildfires that are burning there. More than 120,000 acres of land have burned near the capital, Madrid, making it the biggest forest fire in the country's recent history. Well, this footage, taken from the window of a firefighting plane, shows the extent of the challenge for crews who are tackling the blaze from the ground and the air. But officials say the advance of the wildfires is beginning to slow. More than 300,000 people have been evacuated across both countries, with many sleeping in sports halls or exhibition centres. Our Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports.
A giant wall of smoke and the flames beneath are still approaching Bordeaux. These are the worst wildfires in France in decades, and they're not under control yet. Hundreds of firefighters are battling night and day, dousing the flames, trying everything to stop the advance. But the wind keeps changing, and the fire changing course. It consumes everything it passes over, turning fields and forest to ash. Villages have been evacuated and businesses closed, with traffic diverted, turned away from the danger. This man says the firefighters can't stop the flames, and if they reach us here, he says, they'll destroy everything. In Bordeaux itself, there is smoke in the distance, but the mayor has denied reports the city is preparing to evacuate. He called that false news.
There is some false information circulating, particularly in certain foreign media. There is no evacuation of Bordeaux underway.
But a regional official has told tourists not to come until the fire can be contained. Tens of thousands of people have already been forced to flee their homes and now spend their days and nights on camp beds, in schools and sports centres that are now temporary shelters. And Spain too is still battling a disaster. It called in these Greek planes to help. Here, close to Madrid, the fire has eased a little, but it's still burning. The Interior Ministry calls it the most aggressive that Spain has ever seen. As people fled, pets were abandoned, perhaps lost in the panic. They're now being found and fed by rescuers. The Prime Minister has called it a climate emergency. This hot, dry summer, 6 times more land has been lost to the flames than last year. And near Valencia in the east, A new fire is already raging. It's one of a dozen countrywide. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News.
Joe Barnes is just outside the French town of Cotignac in the hills and joins us now. Joe, tell us what's been happening to you and your family.
Well, it was Tuesday and we saw a plume of smoke while we were having our glass of rosé by the pool. And we were hoping it was blowing in the opposite direction. We reported it to the fire services and they said the fire was contained. By the evening, the fire started burning towards us, and then suddenly things started moving really quickly. There's a lovely, great big hill called the Castellón just in front of our house, and a massive wall of orange flames came roaring up over the hill. Our friends, the neighbours of Graham, about a mile away, they had to leave their house in their whole garden was on fire, so they had to just grab what they could and flee. And we did a similar thing. So my kids were running around getting their Nintendos and chocolate starters and so on, but we left the house pretty quickly. Looking up things with like a wall of flames coming down the hill. We were away from our house for 4 days. The first wave of the fire, thankfully, skipped actually over our house and garden. That was on the Tuesday. Friday afternoon, the fire came back to our area, a little area called Pontfrac, which is very wooded and lovely. Lots of vineyards, thankfully, which I think saved the day. And we had loads of pompiers here fighting fires with our neighbour Simon, who's got big stocks of rainwater. So he stayed and helped protect our house. But the fire came within 10 metres of the back of our house. We've got a gas tank here. It was all very dramatic. We returned on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, really fearful. We just didn't know what we were going to find. And our entire hill is completely black. The whole Castellón, this beautiful, huge hill, is completely black. But our house and garden is completely intact. So we're very, very thankful. And the town of Cotignac is also intact. And people are just trying to get back to normal, which is so, so important for this area.
How can you get back to normal when you know that there's another heat wave coming?
Well, I think, talking to my neighbour, because so much has been burnt out now, all the pine trees, everything that's gone is going to go. And the locals, funny enough, had been waiting. They were waiting for the big fire, just talking to them. They were all expecting it, waiting for it. So in a sense, it's almost a relief. Things are back to normal. This whole town needs tourism. Cotignac's one of those beautiful towns in France. And so they need people to come and enjoy their holidays. I've got a house full of guests here. We're going to be by the pool drinking rosé this afternoon. What people can do is just come, support the area. The community spirit around here is absolutely incredible. They just want to get on with that and help those that have had their houses burnt down and support the pompiers who are all probably exhausted. We're going to take a box of rosé down to the pompiers later to say thank you. So, yeah, it's got to be business as usual as quickly as possible.
You can understand why people might be fearful of visiting parts of France and Spain, for that matter, where the heat waves can turn out to be so deadly.
Well, there's one in the Isle of Wight as well right now, where we've got a little tiny holiday chalet there in Head and Warren. So I don't think Europe is safe anywhere pretty much now. You know, we're living in a different world. So you might as well just go ahead. You're as much risk going to, you know, the Isle of Wight or the Yorkshire Dales or as you are coming to South France. Right now, this area is probably safer than it will be in a long time because it's burnt. The big one has happened and no one lost their lives. Comparatively few houses were burnt down and the town of Cotignac is still intact and as beautiful as ever.
As you say, thanks to the hard work of the pompier. Joe Barnes, enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thank you very much for taking time to talk to us.
That's a pleasure.
Let's go to Spain. Our reporter, Sergi Forcada, is there following developments there. Sergi, what's the picture this morning after a very difficult few days?
So local authorities here are cautiously optimistic about the situation of the fires in central Spain. They are still out of control 5 days since they started, but overnight the flames didn't advance as much. So while it's still not under control, the situation is at least not getting any worse. And the positive this morning was when some people who had been evacuated were told that they could return home as well. It's just a few hundred people, 66,000 were evacuated in central Spain, so most of them will still have to spend the next few hours or days outside their home. Now the situation is quite worrying in the east of the country, near Valencia. There is another fire there, and while that fire is smaller than the ones in central Spain, it's very intense, and the behavior of that fire has been labeled as quite erratic because of the winds, the way it's behaving because of the winds. The picture here is not going to get any better because the temperatures are expected to rise in the next couple of days. So the situation with wildfires could even be worse.
And the authorities are obviously having to pull in resources from other member states of the European Union to try to cope with this.
Yeah, so Spanish authorities saying that all the resources available from Spain are already working around the clock to try to tackle these fires, but it's just not enough. So there's been help coming from different countries, 100 firefighters from Portugal, also planes coming from Italy, from Greece, and some help also from Turkey, because here authorities have been saying that it's just not enough, that they don't have enough resources, because while there's these two major wildfires in central Spain, another fire now very worrying in near Valencia, there are other smaller fires popping up all around the country. So this is a very, very difficult summer for Spain when it comes to wildfires.
Sergi, for the moment, thank you. Sergi Forcada in Spain. Professor Stefan Ramstorff is a climate scientist who works for the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. He was on holiday recently in Lacanau in France and captured some incredible pictures of the fires there on the Gironde coast of France. He left on Friday, safely back home in Potsdam. We're looking at some of these extraordinary pictures that you've sent to us, Stefan. Tell us what happened, how you were caught up in this.
Well, I was surfing off the coast there in Lacanau-Océan, and on Wednesday afternoon I looked back towards the shore and I saw behind the dunes a big plume of smoke rising up from that fire that started about 20 kilometers from there in Le Porge. And yeah, that fire has been growing and growing, and it sent a huge pall of smoke, plume of smoke out over the ocean that had been hanging on in the distance for us on the beach there for the Wednesday and Thursday. But on Friday, the wind changed and the fire moved more northward direction towards us, and the smoke within like 15 minutes or so, the smoke moved over the town of Lacanau-Océan, and the sun through the smoke turned red, and the whole landscape was tinged in a spooky orange color as if we were on Mars.
Yeah, it looks apocalyptic. You can hardly believe that these are photographs that have not been sort of doctored in some way. When we speak to people who've been involved, they're immensely calm, but it must have been terrifying.
Yes, it was really spooky, I would say, like from some strange science fiction movie scene or so. It felt totally unreal.
You work as a climate scientist. How surprised or not are you that we're seeing this across Europe?
I'm not surprised, because this is exactly what climate scientists have been predicting. For example, in 2019, there was a special report on climate change and land from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which in depth discussed the increasing wildfire risk due to global warming. And the physics behind that is also very well understood. Basically, heat dries out the soil and vegetation much faster due to stronger evaporation. There is a simple law of physics behind that that's been known since the early 19th century, actually. And so even if rainfall amounts stay the same, the evaporation enhanced by the hot temperatures will increase the fire risk considerably, lengthen the fire season, make fires get more out of control.
And how hopeful are you that this devastation will be the thing that we need to take meaningful action to prevent the future getting worse and worse?
Well, I can't give up hope, although I have been thinking this when we had the massive flooding in 2002 in Europe, and the European heatwave 2003, which I remind you caused about 70,000 fatalities in Europe. Paris had to put up cool tents on the city boundaries because basically there were too many dead bodies to cope with. And I thought this is really going to shake up the political world. But now at least the German government is again talking about delaying the way to net zero, etc. So, well, I won't give up hope that one day people will really wake up to the fact that this is just only going to get worse until we have reached net zero emissions. And then it's not going to get better. We can just prevent it from getting worse.
Professor Stefan Rahmstorff from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, thank you. Alistair Brook lives in France. Alistair Brook lives in France. He and his wife had to be evacuated from their home on Friday. Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us how you've been affected.
Yeah, thank you, Martine. Yes, it's been a fairly traumatic couple of days since we were woken in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. by the strident sound of our telephones, and we had to evacuate within an hour and join, I must say, a very organised queue of cars to get out of the Cap Ferry area, where there's only one road comes into the Cap Ferry, so many thousands of people were taking this road. So we got out of the Cap Ferry and fortunately managed to find accommodation on the other side of the bay in Arcachon, and I'm speaking to you from Arcachon as we speak.
And where are you staying? Because a lot of people have had to resort to sports halls and public buildings.
Yes, we feel extremely sorry for them. We did have the possibility of having relatives in Arcachon, so we've been put up kindly by them at the moment. So we're in an apartment.
How clear are you about the extent of the damage that has been caused where you live?
Well, the main damage was the fire started to the north of the Cap Ferry Peninsula. It was starting to move south with the north winds, and that would have been extremely dangerous because the Cap Ferry Peninsula is quite thin. And as I said before, there's only one road to get out. So the evacuation, 44,000 people done in a day and a half, plus 8,000 by boat. So the fire now has, as your report was saying, has travelled towards Bordeaux eastward. But unfortunately, we're going to be faced by very hot weather this week. And apparently, the winds will be coming from the north, which would indicate that the fire might start coming south again. So it's very unsure.
How impressed have you been by the response of the authorities to these extreme conditions?
Well, I can't speak highly enough of the fire brigade. As we speak, there are around about 5,000 people who are engaged on the ground, half of them firemen, then policemen, the army, and, of course, the aircraft. So they've done a magnificent job, I think, in keeping people calm, because in situations like that, if there are panic, you talked about some foreign channels having rumours of what's happening in Bordeaux, let's keep it objective and calm, and they've done a wonderful job to do that. So there hasn't been panic. I have not sensed any panic about people, more frustration and a question of how do we deal with this in the future, which is the major question hanging over it.
Yes, and all sorts of warnings that we're likely to see intense fires like this more in the future. We're glad that you and your wife are safe. Alistair,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for talking to us, and hopefully things will settle down for you very soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.
We're joined now by Rebecca Papin, who's staying at her holiday home in Biscarrosse in the Bordeaux region with her 9 and 11-year-old children. We've been speaking to Rebecca a few times over the weekend. Unfortunately, Rebecca missed the evacuation order alert because she was wearing earplugs and didn't hear it, and so is stuck. Rebecca, it's good to have you with us again. When we spoke yesterday, you were trying to head out to get some food. How did the trip go?
So I was able to walk down the street with my children to the supermarket, which was only open for a few hours. And when we went inside, we were the only civilians there. It was me, my children, and military dressed in camouflage. And that actually disturbed me more than anything else that's happened since the fire began, was seeing myself surrounded by soldiers in the supermarket. It felt surreal, like something out of a film. And we were able to get about 3 big bags worth of groceries, which were all that we could carry. And we walked back 7 minutes home with our groceries. So we now have food for about the next 4 days.
And you say you walked. Would it have been possible to go by car?
My street is barricaded with a metal barricade, a metal barrier on both ends of the street. So no cars can enter or exit my street.
How many other people are still in their homes?
I have no idea. I'm alone on my street. However, they have returned 8,000 evacuees to Biscarrosse out of 27,000. However, I've seen none of them.
You said when we spoke yesterday that should you see flames coming towards your house, and hopefully that won't be the case, but you would get in your car and you would do everything you could to get out through these roadblocks. I mean, how feasible would that be now you've seen these barricades in your street?
I can move the barricades.
And that's what you would do?
Yes.
When you've spoken to people in charge of this containment, what advice are they giving you? What help are they offering you?
I've had no communication with the French government since the police came to my home at 7:30 on Friday morning and told me to shelter in place.
What did you expect they would be able to offer you or hope?
Nothing. I think that this is an extraordinary situation and all their resources are focused on fighting the fires, which remain out of control and uncontrolled. So I think they're focusing all the resources on stopping the fire as it goes toward Bordeaux. And I'm fine. I'm just following social media updates, mainly staying in the house. The air quality is much worse today than yesterday. And when I stepped outside earlier, I had to put a mask on. My home smells like charcoal inside. The smell has come through the windows.
If you could leave, would you?
Yes, I'd like to go home now.
How feasible would it be to speak to some of these people, the military that you've seen in camouflage in the supermarket, and ask for them to help you get out?
There's nothing that they can do right now. Earlier, I had an interview. I was on the Times, and they spoke to a French minister, while I was in the interview, and asked them to airlift me out, or if they could airlift me out, and they said it's not possible.
Did they say why?
Not possible, too dangerous.
Too dangerous. You said that you've been managing to remain calm, and as a mother, you have to do that for your children, don't you? Is that how you feel today?
Yes, that's how I feel. I also have my faith, so my faith lets me know that I'm not alone. So I am calm. There's nothing that I can do in this situation right now, but remain calm, continue taking care of my children, and hope that the fire does not turn back to Biscarrosse.
And in the meantime, you're in contact with your husband, who was trying to join you last week but couldn't.
Correct. And also with my father and my brother and all my family members in America who are constantly reaching out, asking for updates.
Well, we wish you every safety. Rebecca Papin, thank you again for talking to us. Thank you.